Good evening. Welcome to our study tonight. I'm excited to bring you in the news and the study. But before I do that, let me just tell you this. Some of you have written, some of you have asked about my cancer treatments. Cheryl and I are going back to MD Anderson every week for 3 weeks, and then we'll go every 21 days. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to do all of our studies, because I don't want to miss a study. So you may see one tape. Next week is a holiday, so we won't have the Wednesday night study next week. But of course, we'll go right back the week after. All right, let's go into the news. Let me tell you this one about prophecy. Now, this is a little lengthy article, but I really would like you to listen to it. It's kind of almost boring in the beginning, but the end is really amazing. The title of it is From Global Financial Crisis to the Mark of the Beast in 10 Steps. And I've kind of simplified it, only because it is complex. But if you're a prophecy watcher, this is a big one. So please listen all the way through to the end. A little over a week ago, a financial crisis erupted into the headlines, not here, because you never get them, as the unraveling of the Japanese yen carry trade led to the biggest two-day drop in the Japanese stock market's history. What took place last week is only the beginning of a much larger financial crisis, and it's going to get far worse before it ends. The only question now is how quickly will it all unfold? A growing crisis is inevitable, and the reason is simple. The Bank of Japan is trapped. The world's fourth largest economy, that's right, fourth largest, is on the verge of a major currency crisis. The Bank of Japan potentially sparking a debt spiral that could destroy the country. If the Bank of Japan starts hiking its rates, this could cause a reversal of the yen carry trade, which is succinctly explained by right here, what I'm going to tell you, which could quickly lead to disorderly unraveling of financial positions all over the world. It will affect us, affect the entire world. The Bank of Japan can choose one of two roads. I'm not going to tell you the details of it, but this is what they are. They can raise interest rates and destroy the domestic economy, or they can lower interest rates and destroy the domestic economy. So no matter what the Bank of Japan does, the result will be the same. And as the fourth largest economy in the world, the destruction of the Japanese economy, whether through a deflationary spiral or hyperinflationary collapse, will severely weaken the entire global market and economy. Moreover, this is happening while almost every other industrialized nation in the world is on the brink of economic calamity due to their own problems with over-indebtedness. Whole world's in debt. That's why this crisis is far, far from over. Just ahead of us is the greatest economic and financial crisis in history, and it's coming. I'm not talking about maybe, it is coming. When the dust settles, the world will find itself trapped in a system indistinguishable in both capability and function from the Mark of the Beast system outlined in Revelation 13, 16 to 17, setting the stage for the rollout of the actual Mark of the Beast system. So how will it happen? This is what I really want you to listen to. Several interim steps stand between the current crisis and the global financial tyranny the Bible tells us is coming. I believe these are the steps, 10 of them, that'll happen. Number 1, continued world financial volatility. Expect to see continued volatility in global financial markets, just like what's happening in Japan. Anticipate bear markets in stocks going way up, real estate and corporate currencies. In coming weeks, expect to see a number of financial news dominate news headlines, even in America. We may even see an epic crash in one of the world markets. That's number 1. Number 2, debt hits its limit. It can't go any further. Eventually, the world will hit what's called peak debt. The ability of consumers, corporations, and governments to take on new debt hits its limit. Our current money system is a debt-based monetary system. This means in order to continue functioning properly, it requires the creation of even greater amounts of debt. Essentially, it's no different than a Ponzi scheme. In a Ponzi scheme, once new investors can't be brought in, the entire scheme unravels. It falls apart, and investors lose everything. In the same way, once more debt can't be taken on globally, the current market system will implode. The currency supply will shrink. This will lead to a cascade of defaults and bankruptcies as the world descends into a deflationary spiral akin to the Great Depression. Step 3, limited bank runs. As this deflationary spiral leads to further job losses and bankruptcies, it will eventually spark a panic in financial markets. During this phase, expect to see bank runs in major industrial economies. In fact, Japan is a prime potential candidate for seeing some of these initial bank runs right now. For instance, the United States, over 1,871 banks are at greater risk of failure due to their commercial real estate exposure. So 1,871 banks right now are on the brink of collapse in America. Next, number 4, a massive government central bank response. Governments and central banks across the globe will spend and print as much as they can in a desperate attempt to avoid prolonged depression. These types of efforts manage to kick the can down the road and avoid the much dreaded deflationary spiral and unraveling of the financial system. That's what we've been doing for almost 2 decades now, just kicking the can down the road. However, those previous efforts were undertaken in an era of relatively low inflation. We now live in a world where the United States national debt tops $35 trillion. What happens to that debt load and the annual budget deficits when the economy begins to contract and millions of people lose their jobs? Tax revenues will decrease while spending explodes on socially safety net programs. Step 5, a bank bail-in, not a bailout, a bail-in. This we really need to hear. Under the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Protection Act, as well as other post-Great Financial Crisis legislation and regulatory changes, failed banks, you remember those, are supposed to be bailed in by depositors, you and I, rather than bailed out by taxpayers and the government. To bail in a bank means depositors are forced to recapitalize the bank with their own deposits. It happened in Greece not too long ago. All cash deposits above the FDIC limit are used to rescue the bank and save it from collapse. At some point, expect the federal officials to allow a bank to fail and be bailed in. Any business exclusively banking at this bailed-in bank will lose everything above the $250,000 limit. So if you have more than $250,000 in the bank, the rest of that, you only can keep $250,000. They'll take everything else. So if you're a business, you lose it all, causing many of those businesses to fail. Businesses all over the United States, all over the world, will panic. That single attempt, and that's all it will take, one attempt, to bail in a bank, will spark a panic run on all but the largest banks. Number 6, you may think I'm crazy, but here it is. Something big blows up. As the largest banks run in history spreads across the globe, years and years of central planning and economic mismanagement will surface in the form of smaller implosions throughout the global economy. Our stock market, just like stock markets in the world, is fixed to a certain point. Think of a leaky boat where the occupants frantically rush to plug the leaks, but for every hole they plug, 3 new leaks spring forth. Number 7, a bank holiday. At this point, the global economy will come to an immediate grinding halt. With credit markets frozen, trucks will stop making deliveries, factories will stop producing widgets, and every node in the global supply chain will absolutely freeze. In response, governments will announce a bank holiday. They've done it before. Global financial markets will all close. All banks will close, and all electronic financial transactions will cease. So what does that mean? A bank holiday last occurred in the United States in March 1933, at the height of the Great Depression. Markets and banks will remain closed until government regulators implement new measures to jumpstart credit markets and restore the orderly function of the financial system. Step 8, we're getting close to what I really want you to hear. Roll out the new system. Okay, get ready. Here is where the mark of the beast starts to come in. Elements are already in place. CBDCs, central bank digital currency. I've been telling you about those for a long time. It's centralized, digital fiat currency. CBDCs will be fully programmable. It means central banks can manipulate in real time. They'll have the ability to raise and lower interest rates on your currency in real time. They'll have the ability to put restrictions on your currency in real time, such as where you can spend your money and on what. With CBDCs, governments will have full insight into every financial transaction you and I make. Before you say people will never agree to that, know this: people will demand it. They'll claim it's necessary to prevent another crisis, just like the one that unfolded and took their money. They also will have tokenized assets. The second element of the new system will be tokenized assets. Every asset on earth, every one of them, will be digitized. This includes stocks, bonds, precious metals, arts, real estate, and anything else of value which can be cataloged, tracked, and traded. Again, the public will embrace tokenized assets. They'll claim they're necessary to prevent another financial crisis like the one that just unfolded. Digital IDs. The third element of the new system will be digital ID. Governments will roll out digital IDs as a means to verify the identities of those transacting in CBDCs and tokenized assets. They'll claim digital IDs will prevent fraud and abuse. In reality, digital ID isn't about what's best for you, it's about what's best for the government. By centralizing all information associated with you as an individual, it streamlines their ability to surveil your life. You can then use CBDs to buy back your lost assets. Don't want CBDs? Then your lost deposits and assets remain lost. And what about those who had no cash or assets to begin with? They'll be on board too. The government will offer them, and I've said this before to you, free cash to jumpstart the economy and avoid social unrest. Simply claim your digital wallet and $10,000 will be waiting for you. Still not convinced? How about $25,000 or $50,000? The offer will prove irresistible for many. We already see such a system rolling out in Thailand right now. Number 9, the new system becomes mandatory. Following it, adoption of the new system will take place rapidly. In the aftermath of the greatest financial and economic crisis in history, many people who have lost their homes, retirement accounts, and cash deposits will gladly accept the offer of a new digital system in order to restore their lost fortunes. They'll willingly accept CBDs and digital IDs as a form of 21st century convenience. At that point, any remaining holdouts who refuse to take part in the new system will simply be forced into the system. This will happen when governments drive the final nail in the coffin of the old system and ban the use of physical cash. I've told this years ago. I remember when they had a $500 bill, government took it out of circulation. I believe soon they're going to start taking out $100 bills. Why are they doing that? They're trying to get us to the point where we don't use cash. They'll claim cash needs to be outlawed because only drug lords, money launderers, and terrorists use it. Once they force the last holdouts into the system, the door to change will slam shut. The entire world will be locked into a new economic system, one that gives governments and central banks unprecedented power over every individual on the face of the planet. This is Revelation's prediction. While this new system will not be the mark of the beast system, it will be indistinguishable in capability and function from the mark of the beast system foretold in the Bible. Infrastructure will be in place for the mark of the beast system to appear at the midpoint of the 7-year tribulation. Step 10, and this is the one. Rollout of the mark of the beast system. Once the world reaches the midpoint of tribulation, the Antichrist and the false prophet will roll out the mark of the beast system. As the book of Revelation reveals, they will require everyone on the face of the earth to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, and no one will be able to buy and sell without the mark. Here's the quote from Revelation 13. He required everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to be given a mark on the right hand or on the forehead. And no one could buy or sell anything without that mark, which was either the name of the beast or the number representing his name. When the Antichrist and false prophet make their move to implement the mark of the beast system, they won't have to scramble to create it. The basic system will already exist. All they have to do is flip the switch. And this is how the world will go from a global financial crisis, to biblical tyranny. The time between these steps will vary, and some are likely to occur simultaneously, like steps 4, 5, and 6. And while we can't know the timetable between step 1 and step 10, rest assured we are already in step 1, continued world financial volatility. So when I'm talking about prophecy and the things in the economy, I'm not just saying it because it's something to say. I'm saying it because we are there. Let me give you a little bit more under the New World Order, the World Economic Forum. Why is the World Economic Forum warning about coming shock events? This is the WEF. The World Economic Forum is a well-funded organization. It's permitted to wreak havoc on global population with no repercussions. Klaus Schwab and his forum have been proclaiming how they'll change the lives of masses for years, but everyone's turning a blind eye or doesn't even think about it. They told us we will eat bugs to be more environmentally sensitive. They told us we will own nothing and be happy about it. That's communism. They've been warning of their sinister plans for some time. It was atrocious to me to hear Michelle Obama talk about people who are rich, the upper 1%, she said, that have so much they need to divide the pie out and give to some others. It's atrocious to me because the Obamas own 4 multi-million-dollar homes, over $12 million each, 4 of them. If anyone wants to take the pie and cut it in half or cut it to pieces, they need to do it. They told us, again, that we'll eat bugs and we'll have nothing and be happy about it. The WEF has infiltrated government cabinets and altered the left side of politics in every single Western nation. Last week, the WEF released an anonymous article warning that we must prepare, quote, for an era of shock events in the very near future. The forum stated years ago that one of its main goals was to remove America's title as global superpower. A global government is their proposed solution. Global. Sound prophetic? It is. This is what John the Revelator told us over 2,000 years ago. The WF warns that disinformation is threatening the biggest election year in history, hence the need for global censorship, both on the streets and online. The forum warns that democracy is declining, largely due to policies it implemented. That's why the Democratic Party is killing America, because they want to become part of this global solution. Civil unrest is rising, and the WF is prepared for the descent. They already recognize that both sides are going to fight over the results of this election. In most countries, even after their vote, citizens will continue to challenge their leaders, questioning whether they have the capacity to tackle our many post-pandemic risks, the article notes. In other words, the people have become unruly and are turning on governments. The World Economic Forum is looking for ways to crush any rebellion before it occurs and set up a global government. Eco, anxiety, and AI. The climate change hysteria is wreaking havoc, as intended so that governments can continue to spend an undefinable problem without the masses questioning their perpetual spending. Then we have the claims that 50% of the workforce will be replaced with AI. WF is telling us that, leaving humans utterly useless and disposable. Again, both of these fears have been orchestrated by the same organization to wants to ease them. An era of shock events. Perhaps the most ominous place in this article is Schwab's promise that the world is on the cusp of an era of shock events. He says there are three major shockwave events that the WF are warning against, that they could also look to take advantage of. One, a new global extremist group emerges. With the world distracted with multiple major wars and leadership in decline, this could be an opportunistic time for a new extremist group to make its mark, they say, and maybe not face as many consequences. Perhaps they'll even leverage AI tools to kick off a new phase of terrorism. Second, they say, a cyber pandemic. That is intentional. The massive global IT outage in July was not terrorism, but simply a faulty software update from a cybersecurity firm. Yet it cost Fortune 500 companies $5.4 billion in damages and shut down flights, banks, hospitals, retailers, and other services worldwide. Imagine if a bad actor did this on purpose and even a grander scale. 3, climate change claims its first island nation in the post-pandemic era. The COP28 plan to phase out fossil fuels may take decades, and it's unclear if world leaders will follow through. What's more probable is that in the meantime, certain island nations will keep fighting their cause, whether it's through international law or new climate funds. But if these islands do succumb to climate change, sinking a lot faster than we expect, how will climate activists and the world leaders react? A clear, indefinable tragedy that can be blamed on the changing climate, forcing people to believe that the hysteria surrounding the climate change is justifiable. What world leader can question climate change if or when an island nation is lost? Klaus Schwab's organization is promising civil unrest. They're promising economic collapse. They're promising World War III and the evaporation of a nation. They will use all of the aforementioned fear tactics to drain people of their power. The globalists are willing to batter the masses with a series of attacks that will act as a staunch warning that there is nowhere to run, and they may actually create the attacks. The government and a global leader, listen to it, will come in to save the day from the crisis they create. Well, which government? Which global leader? Well, in my opinion, WF doesn't stand for World Economic Forum. No, in my book, WF stands for We Escalate Fear, setting up an Antichrist system to come. So we're on the brink. Now, I don't want to be a lot political, but I had about 10 articles I want to give you. This is such a scam with Kamala Harris. She is nowhere near presidential potential, nowhere near it. And she's the most leftist senator we had. She's going to mess America up. Is Harris duping Americans into thinking she supports Israel? On the surface, Harris claims to support Israel. In March, in a speech, she said, quote, "I've said repeatedly since October 7th, Israel has a right to defend itself. Jewish voters have overwhelmingly supported Democrats for decades. They helped Joe Biden to get elected as president in 2020. Harris desperately needs their strong support from Jewish voters. Many of them care deeply about maintaining U.S. support for Israel and fighting Hamas and stopping anti-Semitism domestically. But if you look beneath the surface, Harris's disdain for Israel is extremely obvious. For one, she reflexively validates Hamas propaganda, Last weekend, the Israeli Air Force attacked and killed 31 terrorists. I'll give you that article, who had gathered at a compound with a school and a mosque. The Israeli Defense Forces said it only proceeded after its intelligence confirmed there were no women and no children in the targeted building. Hamas officials, however, quickly claimed Israel killed more than 90 people, including civilians. They're putting their people in front of them, human shields. And Israel won't do anything while there's civilians. But Harris is repeating Hamas's lies that there were children and women there. She repeats it. Now, there are lots of reasons to trust Israel's military. It's our ally. It has democratically elected government and free press. It has a history of honesty. Hamas is a terrorist group that frequently exaggerates or lies about casualty numbers, knowing they'll be parroted by gullible Western leftists like Harris. That group includes Harris. In response to a question on the incident, she said, "Yet again, there are far too many civilians who have been killed." She added, "Israel has an important responsibility to avoid civilian casualties." Look at the double bind Harris puts Israel in. Hamas intentionally puts its military infrastructure in and around civilian buildings. So when Israel exercises its right to defend itself, which she says they have, it sometimes inadvertently kills civilians instead of blasting Hamas for its cowardly actions. Harris smacks Israel. The pressure she puts on Israel is an example of why Hamas uses human shields. Hamas sympathizers pressured her not to pick PA Governor Josh Shapiro. Why? He's Jewish. Instead, she picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. More clues will undermine Israel. In July, she boycotted a congressional speech by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Tim Walz, by the way, for his part, Walz once praised Imam Assad Zaman as a master teacher. Zaman once promoted a pro-Hitler video and declared solidarity with the Palestinians after the October 7th massacre. He's going to be our vice president. This summer, Harris said, "I understand the emotion behind the anti-Semitic protests on college campuses." What? In July, pro-Hamas protesters in Washington, D.C. burned the American flag, vandalized monuments to protest Netanyahu's visit. Harris waited until 2 days later to condemn them in a statement. Trump was the most pro-Israeli president in American history. Harris would be the most pro-Hamas. So if you're thinking of voting for Harris, you probably tuned into the wrong channel tonight. Let me give you a little bit more. Things are really heating up in Israel. This is a picture of an F-35 Israeli jet, one of several hundred, that took out some of the drones that were shot down over this week. One day in the not too distant future, someone in the Middle East is going to push things too far, and it will set off a tsunami of destruction that will shock the entire planet. Israel is armed to the teeth, and Israel's enemies are armed to the teeth. An all-out war in the Middle East should not be an option for anyone, but we are now dangerously close to such a conflict. This may be World War III. Very early this past Sunday morning, Hezbollah was preparing to fire an enormous amount of rockets at targets deep inside of Israel in response to the assassination of Fuad Shukur in Beirut last month. The Israelis figured out what was going on, and a massive preemptive strike against Hezbollah hit rocket launchers all over southern Lebanon. According to the Times of Israel, thousands of targets were struck during this operation. Israeli fighter jets simultaneously struck, I'm reading from it, thousands of Hezbollah targets across southern Lebanon early Sunday morning. And what the military said was a preemptive operation against weaponry that was about to be used in a major attack on central and northern Israel. Thousands of Hezbollah rockets launchers were struck simultaneously by some 100 IAF fighter jets. Following the succession of the IDF operation, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu boldly declared that, quote, thousands of rockets were aimed at northern Israel and they've been destroyed. We are determined, he said, to do everything to defend our country, to return the residents of the north securely to their homes, and to continue upholding a simple rule. Whoever harms us, we will harm them, he said. According to the IDF, some 210 rockets and 20 drones were launched from Lebanon at northern Israel Hezbollah's attack. Some of the projectiles were intercepted, while others impacted, causing minor damage and injuries. Damage was ultimately done was fairly limited. The largest reported damage was to dozens of buildings hit by Hezbollah in Acre. And Acre is right in the center of Israel. Needless to say, this was not the massive retaliation that Islamic militants throughout the Middle East were anticipating. This attack is being widely viewed as a failure, and Hezbollah is being ruthlessly mocked on social media. In particular, some Arabic social media accounts are finding humor in the fact that some chicken farms in northern Israel were damaged. Another image circulating on social media shows dozens of chickens in military fatigues lying dead on the ground with the hashtag Hezbollah killer of chickens and chicks. Of course, Hezbollah is insisting the strikes were great success, and Hassan Nasrallah is warning that more strikes be coming in the future. Both sides continue to prepare for the final showdown that they both know is coming. There are approximately 100,000 Israeli citizens that will not be able to return home until Hezbollah is out of southern Lebanon. And Hezbollah will never leave southern Lebanon willingly. So the IDF is prepared to go into southern Lebanon. And then the other side of Hezbollah has been preparing to invade northern Israel once it happens, troops on the ground. When this time arrives, Hezbollah's invasion of northern Israel will be spearheaded by the group's fanatical Radwan militants. You haven't heard of them. These are the ones who have battled in the Syrian civil war for years, hardened soldiers. They will pose a major threat and challenge to Israel's own crack troops. Overall, Hezbollah has an army of approximately 100,000 men. And according to NBC News, that army is likely to be bolstered by thousands of fighters from militia groups all across the Middle East. They're already aligning on the borders. Now, of course, when an all-out war erupts, it won't just be Hezbollah that Israel's fighting. Syria has an army of approximately 170,000 soldiers, and they're sending them to Lebanon even as we speak. Iran has an army of 420,000 soldiers. If push comes to shove, the IDF is going to have a serious challenge trying to contend with a combined force of that size. In addition, Hezbollah, Syria, and Iran all have vast arsenals of very sophisticated missiles. Thank you, Joe Biden. If Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem are being pummeled by thousands of missiles, Israeli leaders would not just sit back and do nothing. They would respond with overwhelming force, and Beirut and Damascus and Tehran would be flattened. Let me remind you, the only one that has nuclear weapons in that area is Israel, and they have said and they will use them. Let me show you some prophecies. Isaiah 17, 1-3. The burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. Amos 1:3. Thus said the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Damascus and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof. They will be flattened in a day. Amos wrote that 2,790 years ago. Isaiah, 2,770. So it is coming. It is definitely coming. Let me go a little bit further and tell you this one. Enter moral decay. Democrats' abortion convention gets boost from evangelicals for Harris. You hear me, right? Evangelicals for Harris. It's an oxymoron, but it's there. According to Political Action Group, Evangelicals for Harris, the Democratic convention thus far has been a paragon, they say, of godliness. It is not godly at all. A side note, if you noticed the left-wing drift of Christianity today over the past several years, it's no accident one of the most influential evangelicals for Harris, Claude Alexander, is the chair of Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary's Board of Trustees, sits on the board of Christianity Today, Council for Christian Colleges and Universities, InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, BioLogos, and other large Christian organizations. Alexander also thinks abortion should be legal. Evangelicals for Harris makes as much sense as abortionists for babies. I don't know what the DNC, I don't know what DNC those spiritual quislings have been watching, but what the rest of us have witnessed highlights the fact that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are not only the abortion candidates running an abortion election, this year's Democratic extravaganza could also aptly be called the abortion convention. They didn't say any policy at all except abortion. They hammered their focus on abortion. Monday night's speech by President Joe Biden, who made sure to focus on abortion as well. Even when he can't barely talk, Joe Biden is still all in on abortion. It's both sad and terrifying that this old man is going to go to his grave defending an abortion regime with a kill count of over 60 million. That's a fearful way to go. Consider this. 4 years ago at the Democratic convention, they never even mentioned the word abortion. This was all over the DNC. Abortion activism wasn't just limited to the stage. On the streets, women marched literally dressed up like abortion pills, holding signs condemning Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, and announcing that we're abortion AF, a double entendre, referring to the crude acronym, as well as the name of an abortion group called Abortion Access Front. The group specializes in crude tactics and works to facilitate abortion across the United States. Planned Parenthood opened free child sacrifices, and the roar of the crowd inside is easily loud enough to drown out both the silent screams of dying children and the hardened consciousness of evangelicals for Harris. 10 babies were murdered for free outside the DNC convention in mobile abortion vans. Satan loves innocent blood. It was a sacrifice. Make no mistake about it, the Democratic Party is really the demonic party. Let me go a little bit further and give you a couple more things that are kind of coming. So NASA's getting used to the fact that they can't track all our asteroids that are coming into the Earth, and they're scared. So asteroid 99942, called Apophis, is a near-Earth object, a NEO, estimated to be about 1,100 feet across. When it's discovered in 2004, Apophis was identified as one of the most hazardous asteroids that could impact the Earth. There's Apophis right there. Apophis quickly gained notoriety as an asteroid that could pose a serious threat to the Earth when astronomers predicted it would come uncomfortably close in 2029. Astronomers are also working to develop a better understanding of asteroids' rotation rate and the axis it spins around, known as its spin state, because any tumble in that could bring it right to the planet. That knowledge will enable them to determine the orientation of the asteroid will have with Earth as it encounters our planet's gravitational field in 2029, which could change that spin state and even cause asteroid quakes. The next article is a follow-up. You're looking at work that's underway on NASA's next generation asteroid hunter. They can't find all of them. They come in, some of them come around the sun, and they don't see them until they're too close. NASA's new asteroid hunting spacecraft is taking shape at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Southern California. Called NEO Surveyor, Near-Earth Object Surveyor, this cutting-edge infrared space telescope will seek out the hardest to find asteroids and comets that might pose a hazard to our planet. In fact, it is the agency's first space telescope designed specifically for planetary defense. The spacecraft will travel 1 million miles to a region of gravitational stability called the L1 Lagrange point between Earth and the Sun. From there, its large sunshade will block the glare and the heat of the sunlight, allowing the mission to discover and track near-Earth objects as they approach Earth from the direction of the Sun, which is extremely difficult for observatories to do. The space telescope may reveal asteroids called Earth Trojans, which lead and trail our planet's orbit and are difficult to see from the ground or from Earth's orbit. They know a big one is coming. And you know what? We know it too, because John tells us that it's going to happen. That's in the news. I want to go right